Great. Hey, hello everyone. Hi, good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to Adobe Analytics Champion User Group Office Hours. This is the second session for the month to accommodate both APAC and EMEA timing slots. Session is being recorded and would be available in Adobe Analytics User Group YouTube channel, and the link is already there. So myself, Pradeep Arunraj, Enterprise Architect from Extro Digital. I have 14 plus years of experience in analytics and martech solution, and this is my second year in Adobe Analytics Champion program. I'm based out of India, Chennai, and I'll be hosting this particular meeting. I have some great people along with me to join this office hours, so I would just give a few more minutes so that they can introduce themselves. Frederick, you want to go?
Sure. Let me stop fiddling around with the music. Does it actually work now? Do I have music for myself? Sorry, I'm a child. Yes. This was the music I was planning to use for the intro, but now I can just use it for myself or whatever. No, I'm not going to do that actually. Hi, Frederick. I'm a director of marketing technology at a German consultancy called Morstade. We do all sorts of marketing technology. Google, not the topic for today, but we do that as well. Not me. Other people do that with more patience. I do Adobe stuff, so Adobe Analytics, Customer Journey Analytics, Launch, and all those exciting things. It's my 4th year as a champion, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm doing this for many years, since Catalyst 15 or whatever. So yeah, hello, happy to be here. And sorry.
I'll go. Hi, everyone. My name's Mandy George. This is my 3rd year as an Adobe Analytics champion, and I am currently a senior e-commerce analyst for Staples Canada.
Okay.
Bhumika?
Hi, so I'm Bhumika. I'm basically from India, but moved to London a year ago. So I'm currently working as an analytics implementation specialist at Marks and Spencers. This is my first year as an Adobe champion. So looking forward to answer all the questions and great to be here. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bhumika. Yeah, so let's get directly into questions. We already got few questions from the users, right? So we just put down all these things in the workspace. So we will just go and discuss about those questions one by one, right? So starting with the first question, what are the form conversion tracking best practices, right? So this is the first question. Frederick, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you. So, I mean, of course, the answer really depends on what your company is doing, what your use cases are. So, like most companies have something like a like support form, like a single form with like 1 or 2 questions. That's like very very easy on the user, and like there's not that much business interest in them. Some have like sales funnels and like conversion funnels for like lead generation and all that. So, of course, the biggest part in here is like, what does progress mean? Like, what is a conversion for you? Do you actually want to optimize, like, if you have a multi-step form, like where people go to? So a lot of this is like the business and like SDR part of the like project to actually figure out what is it your company is interested in, what do you want to achieve, how do you want to track that, and all that. So I think like the stuff that I didn't even write down, because I think everyone just does that, is to of course track if the form is submitted, which would be a conversion, because then you can just see how often do people do this. So that's like the first thing I think that everyone is just doing. And then it really depends. Like if you have a multi-step form, of course track if people move from one step to another. I like to have something generic there, like step 1 out of 5 or like 3 out of 5 or something, which works great with like classification rules and all that. On the other hand, depending on what the business needs and like who's going to use the data, I always feel that other tools like Hotjar or Decibel, like session recording tools, where you can actually see people interact with the form and like go back between like one form field and another form field, or like there's some validation happening and then people need to go back and forth. Like that's so hard to analyze properly in Adobe Analytics, because you just have like a flow visualization or like a table for it, but like actually seeing people do those things and like struggle in real time, I think that's like a very valuable thing to see and to learn from. So that's also where I'm like, okay, like some high level tracking for a form or like a funnel is in order, but if it's like more detailed and like really like click tracking and all that, I'm like, Adobe Analytics is not my favorite tool to visualize that and to make it tangible. So that's also why I want to give those other tools like a shout out, because yeah, they can be very valuable for those. So yeah.
Okay. Makes I'll go last. Is that fine?
Sure,
Mandy?
Arun.
Yeah. I guess Mandy, you are on mute.
Go ahead, one of you guys.
Okay,
I didn't make
okay.
notes for this one, so go ahead.
That's fine. Okay. So Bhumika, you can go, right? I will go at the end.
Yep, sure. So basically, when it comes to tracking forms, one approach I have found really effective is using concatenated props to combine details like the form name, step number, and action into a single variable. For example, like instead of tracking this separately, we can send a single value like complete form, pipe, and then step one completed, and then pipe, and then submit. Like this has two major benefits. First, it keeps the tracking lightweight by using fewer props, which is especially helpful when there's a limit on the number of variables we can use. And also, secondly, it simplifies reporting in Adobe Workspace. Like instead of managing multiple dimensions, we can quickly analyze everything through one prop. So I applied this approach while working on a multi-step registration form for an e-commerce client. By combining these values, we reduced the implementation complexity and made it easier for the analytics team to understand like which step users were completing and where they dropped off. And another important consideration is like minimizing the server calls by firing events only at key milestones. For example, like instead of tracking every single field interaction, we can focus on major events like form start, step completion if it's a multi-step form, and final submission. This way, we can avoid inflating server costs with unnecessary hits while still capturing the meaningful insights. And my second point was like set up real time alerts for drop off. Like it's a kind of alerts we can utilize from the Adobe Analytics. So for a retail client, like we configured an alert in Adobe Analytics to monitor the form submissions for their new complete registration form. So the alert was set to trigger like if submissions dropped by more than 20% within a 24 period. After deployment, we received the alert later that day showing 25% drop in submission compared to the previous period. So using this technique, like upon investigating, we found a tagging issue in the submit button that prevented data from being captured properly. The alert wasn't instantaneous, but it gave us timely insights to resolve the issues within a few hours, ensuring like minimal disruption to the user experience and business metrics. So these are my view over this question.
Might be losing Aaron.
Is it just me or is he breaking up? Okay.
He is.
Where we are into this call, so you know. So let me quickly
And you were breaking up.
connect.
There he goes.
Hey, hi. Okay, tell me if at all I'm audible, because I guess that was some internet.
Seems fine now.
Yeah, you're good
Okay,
now.
fine. Great. Okay, I just shifted my network. Whenever all
Oh.
these important meetings happen, right, your network will go down. So it's a global truth, right? You know. Thank you, Bhumika. Thanks for all your inputs. Yes, I want to take it a little bit tactical this time. So as Frederick said, it is mostly about what your business needs to track, right? So if at all you are clear with what business wants, then you just need to ensure that, right, all those KPIs are being tracked whenever you are getting into the conversion rate, right? So for all the tactical level of understanding, I would start with, let's say, form name and the form category, right? So form name, form category is like whether it's a lead form, whether it's application form, right? So having a segregation and grouping them would be really helpful in terms of understanding the conversions, right? Because an application conversion might be different than a form lead conversion, right? It's a one-step form versus a multi-step form, right? So putting all these categories would be really helpful. Yeah, for a multi-step form, step number. So if at all we need to understand the funnel progression, because most of the people would love to see the funnel, right? So they want to understand where they start, right? Which particular step they are going on, right? So the funnel analysis is something, right, which everybody would love. So having a proper step number, right, and all these things for a multi-step form would be really great. And in addition, which particular field interacted, if at all you want to track without increasing a server call, or even if server call doesn't matter for you, right? Capturing all these things can also give you much more detailed funnel analysis, which particular field people are dropping, what was the problem, and all these things. But to understand what is the problem, again, we can track the errors, form submission errors, validations errors, and multiple items, right? So events are common. We know that we need to capture start to end, and all these things are common. But during my experience, I also found that one of the metric which is very important most of the time, it is requested by businesses, time to complete a particular form. People are very interested in terms of like, hey, tell me the time, right? The entire application being submitted, right? From the start till the end, what is the time taken, right? So it is one of the important metric, right? People would love to see, and usually most of the time, I would include it by default, right? So these are some of the items, right, which from the conversion point of view, it is important, or it is necessity, based on the necessity of the requirement. You can track and ensure that we have the complete conversion tracking in place. Okay, moving to the next question right now. How can I upload the data into Adobe Analytics? For example, a list of resources that I want to look at, like a reference table, right? So, which means ideally an import options, right? So, Frederick, do you want to start?
Sure, I can. From how this question sounded like to me, it might be that you might be tracking something like a list of hotels or whatever, like a in travel like an accommodation, like something that is like something that like holds value to your business. And you have a technical identifier like a name or an ID or something, and you want to have more information about that thing. So of course the go-to way for that would be classifications, which is practically like a lookup table. You can have something like your product SKU, or like a hotel resort ID or something that doesn't tell anyone anything about your data, and then you can later on translate that through classifications into like a product name, like a product type, like a product size, whatever it might be. So those types of lookups are pretty cool because they're retroactive, and you can just start tracking your IDs today, and then 2 years later you recognize, hey, maybe people want to have more than the product SKU or whatever, and then you can upload your all product information retroactively. It will all fix itself retroactively, so you can look at 2-year-old data with like the newest information upload today, which might be what you're after already. So if you're looking for because you whoever you are, like you mentioned the term reference table, so like a lookup table, that is pretty much what classifications are. If you want to have something more like a offline import, for example, if you want to have metrics from your offsite advertising platforms, or from your like backend order numbers, or like offline order conversions and all those things, you can use summary level data sources. That also works with what Adobe calls a transaction ID. So you can even like tie something like product returns to a single order and all that stuff. So Lucas Oldenburg has written like a bunch of blog posts about transaction ID data sources because he's using them heavily. So that's something you might be looking at. If you're looking at the most I don't want to say the most painful way to bring data into Adobe Analytics, but like the most technical way and the most like down to the detail one. Like if you actually want to have like actual user like events and like user activity in Adobe Analytics from a different source, you can use the Bike Data Insertion API, which is how like full processing data sources are called today, which is basically a way if you don't want to use the like web libraries to bring data into Adobe Analytics, like you want to bring something in from your data lake or something, you can use those. It's something you need to pay for. So the other two are free. So some reliable data sources and classifications you can upload as much as you want. It will not cost you anything. If you use the Bike Data Insertion API, it will be a normal server call that's built for that. So be careful. And you also cannot mess up historical data and all those things. So there's a bunch of things to learn before you start using the Bike Data Insertion API, because you do have the real chance of messing up your production data in a very nasty way with it. But it exists. So really, depending on what you want, those are the options I could think of.
Thanks, Frederick. Yeah, but one more point which I want to make here from the data import point of view is customer attributes, because this is one of the things, right, which I had like really dealt and learned in a harder way. So yeah, unlike a lookup, right, it is just mapped to the customer ID, not just customer ID, right, but the entire visitor, right. When your ECID and the customer ID is synced, and when you upload all these customer attributes, right, irrespective of whether it's an authenticated session or an unauthenticated session, right, and the customer attributes can persist, right. You can go back and you can tie up to that particular visitor or particular customer, right. So customer attributes is one of the options, right, where you can also upload some of the customer attributes. And again, you have some limits when it comes to customer attributes, right. So for select it is 3, right. For other licensing it is different, right. For Prime 15 and Ultimate 200. And I do remember that it is an add-on. I'm not pretty sure, Frederick, if at all you have any thoughts that you can tell me, right? I guess customer attribute something you need to have as an add-on. That's my understanding. But most of the time, whenever I work with most of the clients, I have seen customer attributes existing without any additional cost. So it is another way where you can just go and add your customer attributes and do some analysis on top of it.
If I can add a point to this one before we move
Yeah.
on to the next one, I just want to sort of build off what Frederick was saying about classifications and how those can be extremely powerful. I think a lot of people underestimate how powerful using classifications can be. In addition to, with the importer being able to, bring in the information all historically, that gives you the option to also do like classifications and sub classifications. So you can build one classification off of another. You can actually capture, like you can use fewer evars and props and just build classifications off of it as well. So instead of capturing your product name and the brand and the size and everything else in different variables, you just capture your product ID and bring everything else in with a classification. Yeah, so I just want to really emphasize how powerful those are.
You just put a post of mine in the chat, like a love letter to classifications, basically, with like a couple of use cases for that. Because yes, use them and use them always.
But do you have any limitation to the classification, Frederick? But customer, yeah. So when we use classification, I guess it works based on the props and UR limits, right? The length of it, right? And customer attribute has a different limit as well. That's my understanding, right? So there are some sort of difference between when we use classification with customer attributes, right? So that might be one of the dissimilarities which we might look into, right?
Yeah, it's also good for stuff like if you're trying to capture campaign names that are very long, if there's a shorter campaign ID that's captured, and then you can bring in a slightly longer name using classifications, or even with sub-classifications having like the different pieces of a campaign name. So, at one of my old companies, we would have like the day that it launched, the site section, the name of the campaign, and then I forget the rest. There was like 7 pieces of information, which all gets very long. And we had classifications for each section of the campaign ID. So we didn't have to worry about running out of space. We just kept using all the separate classifications and combining them as needed.
Perfect. Yes. Thanks, Mandy. Thanks, Frederick. So I'm just moving to the next question. Bhumika, do you have any points to add, or else can we move to the next question?
So I have only one point. I know there is a restriction for the classification importer, like the maximum file size limit is 50 MB for the manual upload. So basically, we use the FTP for the larger classifications upload. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, when you say there is a limit, okay, suddenly I remember that it is also not readily available, right? So whenever you upload any classification, right, it will also take some time to reflect that, right? So
Correct.
we need to like get into all these things. We need to know, right, how these reporting mechanism and how all these classifications are also available in the downstream mechanism, right? Downstream engines is also something we should consider when you think about classification or customer
Correct.
attributes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
thank
important
you.
for stuff like
Great points.
data feeds where
Yeah,
classifications don't come into the data feeds.
right. So the data warehouse, data feeds, how these will be reflecting, right? So we should have that into our considerations. Great. Thanks, Bhumika. Thanks, Mandy. So going into the next topic, attribution IQ. Can you please explain participation and linear attribution for a scenario that a user can do cart additions by clicking an add to cart button for any section of a website? Each section is flagged in an EVAR. The purpose is to understand which button leads to most cart additions. So I'm just stopping my screen share. Frederick, you want to go and share anything or?
Oh yeah, I can.
Okay,
So
let me
because
quickly start. Yeah.
we click this button and hope it works, because it either works or crashes my entire browser. So am I there? Am I
Yeah,
alive?
we can.
Very good.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, we can.
So just because my idea was to let's do it together. So like because you mentioned the like whoever you are who asked the question, because you mentioned the word like sections of the website, and you mentioned card editions, I was like, let's use that. So in this implementation, like apparently the site section is by default not covered or like tracked together with the card editions. And the nice thing about that is, if I just copy this here once more, like you can just use Attribution IQ to change your attribution models on the fly in Adobe Analytics, and you can choose something like a visit-based look-back window, and then the question was about linear model and the participation model. So just do that. I think it switched back my window. How rude. So visit, I said. It's the good thing. If it's so quick, you can just play around with it. So here we have participation. For the visit, I want to have this. And now you can see it's actually making all of my my card editions show up for my site section. Even I'm not tracking them like together in this implementation. Apparently, all of this is demo data, by the way. So don't blame any of us on like some data quality issues. It's literally not ours. We can just play around with it. So the difference between linear attribution and the participation attributions is basically, with a linear attribution, you're taking the conversion, whatever is happening, so your card edition, and then Adobe Analytics looks back at all of the like reporting items, like site sections in this case, that were coming before that, and like however many you have, they all get a little bit of the like of the success. So if you have 10 site sections before your card editions, every site section will retrieve 1/10 of that conversion. So this is good because like your total number of card editions will be what you have in the table below, which might make sense to your business users if they try to compare it with other data. So the participation model works a little bit different, because every kind of element, every reporting item receives the full credit always. So in this case, you can see we have those 116,863 total card editions, and you can see the top item here gets all of them because all the card editions happen on the detailed site section, it seems like. So if you sum up the rows in this like column here, there will be far more than what like the total number of conversions, so card additions that actually happened in this case. So it might be confusing, but yeah, this way will give a like slightly different view on it, because it's like, yeah, if you played along the team to like make this success happen, you get the full credit, and here the credit is split across all of the elements on that. So I find like attribution IQ pretty useful for like this type of analysis, because you can just see like I just made those card additions work with this dimension that like didn't work before, so now I can actually use it this way. And like quick tip to share for that, if I drag and drop it in here one more time, like my favorite way to do this is to just emulate what EVAs are doing. So use something like last touch and visit. So this will then, in most cases, unless your implementation works very weirdly, in most cases it will just show on which page like in this case card addition happened. So that's pretty useful, I would say. So yeah. Should I give the screen sharing to someone else, or do I just continue screen sharing and Mandy can chime in?
I was going to say, if you can share it with me for a minute, I'm going to go through a couple things with attribution IQ. Yeah.
Attribution IQ is one of the hottest topic, right? Whenever it comes to all these campaigns and everything.
Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful topic. So just building off of what Frederick said, the linear attribution is great because it lets you have equal credit for every touch point. But if you have a situation where you want to have a different model, linear and participation aren't the only ones. They're probably some of the more common ones. But you've got all kinds of other models that you can use as well. So if you want to give more credit to touch points later in the journey, you can use something like a J curve, which isn't quite last touch, but it's a little bit more similar because they're getting more credit, an inverse J, and so on. The other really powerful thing about attribution IQ is this look back window. So you can change this to be from visit to different time periods, even having a custom time period. So even if you have EVARs that are captured with a particular time period, you can set up your attribution IQ and your metric and look at different periods. And the last thing is, if you have an implementation like this where a variable is not captured with the event that you want, you can do this on the fly, but you can also use the metric builder to make a permanent version of this. So if you bring in, we'll do our card additions, and then if you click on this gear icon over here at the right, it lets you use the non-default attribution model here. So it's the same setup as what you have before. You can set it up however you want and then actually save it. So you don't have to rebuild it every time that you need it. You can save it and reuse it as needed. Yeah.
Yeah, great. One point which I want to have talk related to this participation and linear is about the deduplication. So let's say in a linear flow, right, if the same line item is occurring multiple times in a linear, right, every instance of that particular item will get credit. Let's say if you have loaded to home page twice and then land to a cart page, right, then it is not just about 1/2, right? It's because there is only 2 page, rather it is about 3 times the page has been set, 2 times the home page and then 1 time the cart page, right? So it is 1/3. But it is not the case when it comes to participation. So participation is clever enough so that it can remove the deduplication and ensure that, right, the participation is counted only once, irrespective of how many times it is occurring within the particular look back window or the window which we are selecting, right? Which is pretty cool, right? So one of my blog, right, was also focusing on the page content velocity, right? During, I guess, before 3 to 4 years, people are also discussing about how well my new page is performing, how well my campaign is performing, right? So there are a few questions related to the page content velocity, and in Adobe, I guess Adobe by default has a content velocity as a metric itself, so that we can use the content velocity against any particular dimension to get how effective is your content for any particular downstream flows, right? So one of the good metric which I would use most of the time is also content velocity, right? And it is working. It is working on the participation metric. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you want me to pass the screen share back to you?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Can I will share my screen. Yes. Okay. Hope you can see my screen. Okay. Great. Thanks, Frederick. Thanks, Mandy. Yeah, so till now it is mostly related to reporting, but let's get into the implementation side of it, right? It is going to be a very big question. In short, Frederick, the question here is, let's say for all I'm sending an link tracking, right? So how many variables or what are the variables I need to send? It has to be a link specific variables, or else do I need to send everything, right? Because you know about all these persistence and non-persistent everything, right? How do we deal with this?
Sure.
So let me stop my screen share, right? So that you can help us in terms of navigating to launch or anything.
Indeed. I will try. It's beautiful that you have to go through all those menus time and time again if you share your screen. So you should be seeing the browser now.
Yeah.
Perfect. So how I interpreted this question is like the old question of, all right, in Adobe Launch, you're going to have some dimensions like EVAs and props that are specific to a event, like a page view or a link click or whatever it might be. And then you have things that are like shared across events, like your page domain, for example. So things that should happen on each and every event, and like you can set them all on the same rules and all that, but maybe there's other ways to do that. So I'm going to be very opinionated about that because like if I have a very particular opinion about how you should do things in Launch, I'm going to just push it onto all of you. So some people like to do things in code. So for example, in your Adobe Analytics implementation, if you go away, if you go to the very bottom, you have the option to use custom code here, and something that you could always do is something like s.do plugins. So define a function here that basically runs when each and every event is sent to Adobe Analytics. So it runs a little bit before that event is actually sent out. And there you could set those like variables globally. And you can say, all right, whenever this event is happening, you're going to manually type in something like, actually do it s.e var1 equals whatever, right? So you can then just write this out and say those events should, like whatever event goes out, always needs to have this dimension set. And I'm a person who has a very strong opinion about code in Launch because I say code doesn't go in Launch because it's a UI-based tool and you should need to be able to find all the places where someone might have put code to be able to manage tags in Launch. Well, and I'm calling it Launch, but like we all know, I mean tags and all that. So how I like to do this instead is, for example, if I have like something like a link tracking event. So we just call this link tracking. Then you might have whatever event is firing this link tracking event, and then you're going to have your actions here for your like for your set bars and all that. So in the Adobe Analytics example here, if we actually set variables, then you will just write out whatever you need to set for this link click event. Now, what Adobe tags, call it that, so I hope Adobe is happy now. So what Adobe Launch supports is in your event configuration, in the advanced options, you have something that is called order. So what the order does is pretty cool, because in here you can say that when this event happens, so this is a link tracking event, so maybe you click something or something like that. Here you can say all the rules that fire when this event happens, they should run in order. And what you can do here is you can just create many rules for the same events, but they will all adhere to the order that you set them in. What that will mean, I hope I will start making sense in a second, so bear with me. What that will mean is if you, for example, have something like your global variables. So an event that sets all of your global variables, and you can configure this to, for example, also fire on your click events. And if this rule has you can see it here, if this rule now has a lower order, so something like number 1, this will be the first thing that runs when this event fires. So you can first say, I want to set like any element. You shouldn't do that, but just for demonstration. So you first have this for your global variables. It's a click rule. And then once you have your link click rule, you will then go in here again, say this is a, where is it? A click rule on every element. And this one will be in order number 2. So first, the rule runs that sets the global variables, and then the rule runs that sets the local variables, if you want to call it that. So let's say this is my link click rule. And right now, there's not any action in here. And you can then say, maybe you have something like send link click beacon. And you can just add once more your click event in here, like this. And now this will be order number 3. So this runs last. So you can now see first order number 1 runs, then 2, then 3. And they all listen to the same click event. And this will then actually, in my Adobe Analytics extension, this will then actually send my beacon. So a link click beacon with the name link, because I'm creative. So this way you can then actually use those 3 rules in order. And why this is cool is because in your global variables, you can now add more events in here. So for example, if you want to have something like your page bottom, so for page view events, you can also configure it to run for page view events, again with the lowest running order that you have available. And this way, this rule runs on 2 events now. So this will run for your link clicks and your page views. And the good thing in there is some people like to chain rules together with direct call rules and all that. But this will actually respect the order in which you define it. So if you want to go very in-depth and very nerdy about this topic, you can read up on like the internal event loop in Adobe Launch and like how like events are running in order and how Launch determines what should come when. So there's like a whole rabbit hole that I'm not going to dive into right now unless someone makes me. But this way, I like to do this. So other people like to do it in different ways. But I say this is the most launchy way to do this because this doesn't use any custom code. This uses the event ordering as a feature in Launch. So this is my preferred way to do that. And now everybody else has a chance to tell me why I'm wrong about that.
Great. Thanks, Frederick. Frederick, one question here, right? So let's say if at all we are like triggering some of the link tracking codes, right? Let's say on the click of any particular button, I want to send some codes, let's say link name. Mm-hmm. So during the time, usually we will have an option, right? We can either put s.link track as like empty, so that all the variables that is there in the page level can be like passed into the link tracking as well, right? So that at any time we can slice and dice the data. But we know that few of the blogs and few of the experts state that should not pass all these dimensions directly to the link tracking. Rather, you need to be very specific, right? So what's your take on this? Do we need to go on for link tracking? Do we need to define these dimensions metrics, or else it is fine to have like all these variables passed on into the link tracking as well? So what I would do is most of the time I pass everything, right? Because let's say if I want to break any of the link tracking, right, with an ECID, right? ECID is something which I'm catching for a page view, right? Or as a page name in an EVA, right? I'm capturing. If I don't set it within the link tracking, the problem might be, right, if I want to break down into a prop or EVA, I might not see anything, right? Rather, it will be empty, right? Or rather, I will see unspecified because it is not a part of link tracking. So usually what I would do is I would set that link track var empty, right? So all the values that is set in the page variables, right, is passing, right? So that's what I do. So what's your take? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a simple man. So the way I like to build my implementations is always to say, I don't have a concrete number for that, but like I would say like 90% of my dimensions should be set with each and every event. So I like to have things like, unless there's a very good reason to not do it, to just default to being like, yeah, this needs to be everywhere. Like as you say, like a page name, your ECD, your URL, like all of those things should just be on every event. Like you can configure your EVA to have like visit expiration, like persisted as well. But like I just like to do it everywhere because people just expect it. And like usually I try to keep the mental load on my users as low as possible. And if there's like specific rules and being like, hey, the page URL is only set on page views and not on link clicks, they're going to be like, okay, how do I do that? And then you need to explain attribution IQ so you can attribute that. It's like so much mental load on them, and I'm just like, hey, here's your URL, you can use it with everything, and here's your page name, you can use it with everything. Like I want to make it easy for them, because even if it's not the most sophisticated setup, it's not the most like minute way to decide like which variable goes where, but I'm always like, people usually don't care that much about it, and like after their basic training, they will forget about all those things, and then you need to look it up in the SDR or documentation or whatever. And I'm like, I don't want my users to have to do that. So I'm a simple man. I assume anyone else is as well. I'm trying to not burden them with this kind of knowledge. So that's how I like to do it. And like as I said, unless there's a good way or a good reason for not doing that, I default to being like, yeah, let's keep it easy on that part. But that's just me and my simple mind.
Great. I have a follow-up question here, right? Does launch have a convenient way to locate and discern which rules are specified at which order hierarchy? Or do we need to always click into the rule to see the order?
Sadly, you do have to do that. So like if I, no, actually I don't go here, but if I go back to my rules, like there's no way to show it here. I've been wishing for a long time that Adobe would give us an option to show more columns, like which actions are in a rule, or like which extensions are used in a rule, like something more than like this long empty line. Right now, we do not have it. So I like to, well, like I need to always click into it and then also click on the event again to see it there and the advanced options and all that. Sadly, it's a little bit click heavy, but yeah.
Benjamin, I have one, one suggestion for you. That is a inspector called AEP inspector for Google Sheets, right? Frederick might know, right? So there is an extension called AEP Launch Inspector where you can just copy paste this launch code, right? The launch environment code, and it can get you all these rules, data elements, and everything, right? So when you use that, it automatically get this particular hierarchy as well as a separate tab. So usually whenever I try to like do some governance and do all these things, what I will do is I use that particular launch inspector, which is a very, very cool extension for Google Sheets, right? So you need to go to download Google Sheet and you need to run it in Google Sheet. But usually I do it for all the governance. So if you do that, yeah, in launch, we don't have an option for sure. But if at all you need to understand, let's say you have 200, 300 rules, you want to understand everything, sort everything, play with this, then I would definitely recommend for this particular AEP inspector tool, right? It is very cool.
So very good tip. So like maybe you have a link to share to the like extension store in the chat. But I also want to like, we're just sharing tips and tricks. Like what I want to make you guys aware of is also something that I don't see many people use. So whenever you're just curious, like what a company like DHL that I do know from the inside does in terms of tech management, then there's actually a sneaky way to do that. So on the front end, you have the satellite object, which is just launch. And what most people don't know is that within the satellite object, there's another object called, what is my browser doing? Called container. And the container object is a very neat like list of all the things that are happening in launch. So here you have all of your data elements. You have all of your rules. So if you just want to go into the front end, just check a website out and be like, hey, I've seen that guy talk at Summit or whatever, and they have like maybe a very good like launch setup on their page. You can literally just go in here and be like, hey, what's their naming convention? Like, how do they structure the rules in terms of like all the actions and conditions? If you're good with JavaScript, you can literally just go through this and assemble it yourself, and just basically do the thing that probably also the launch inspector does for Google Sheets, and do it a little bit manually in the front end. But yeah, I always like to tell people about satellite container, because that's just a very, very handy thing to look into. And if you ever want to steal from someone else, just feel free to do that. If you want to get some inspiration, you can just look at someone else's naming conventions and all that. Yeah, most of those have not been created when I was at their company. Well, just want to say it. No, but yeah.
Going
Hey,
back
thanks,
to
Frederick.
the order hierarchy for a second, could you create like a naming convention for the rules and maybe put like the order number in the name, that way you don't have to click into it?
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
That
that's a
will
great one.
exactly. It's a very good tip. What might get a little bit messy is when you have multiple events in the same rule, and you have you need to figure out a way how to structure that. But yeah, naming conventions for the win, and that's a good application of those.
Yes. Governance is always tougher when it comes to launch, right? We'll be having multiple codes. That's a great tip, Mandy. So we will also take a note and we will also follow. Thank you. Yeah. So do we have we have few questions in the chat as well. So do you want to quickly cover that? I guess one question is, can we break down prop by prop, EVA by EVA, prop by EVA, and EVA by prop, right? All 4 breakdown doing is accurate. Is that accurate? Is the question.
I mean, we can all, like the 4 of us, we can give the same answer at the same time. So 3, 2, 1, yes.
Yes. Right?
Cool.
So yeah. So nowadays I
Next
don't think
question.
so we are differentiating anything by prop or EVA right after the introduction of workspace. I guess earlier during site catalyst days might be this is like valid. Now it is like completely invalid.
Yes. Before we had correlations and breakdowns and whatnot, and like strict rules against everything. So I mean, there might be something like your attribution IQ settings, or like your EVA expiration that might be, whatever it is in your implementation. But yes, technically you can. It will give you a result, and then you need to make sure it is what you're after. But yeah, technically it works.
Great. One more question from the chat is, when can we use merchandising EVA? What is their real-time benefits?
So I can talk to merchandising EVARs.
Yes. Yes,
So
please.
whereas EVARs have a persistence for whatever your allotted time period is, merchandising EVARs will still persist, but they're going to tie to a specific product. So instead of just, so say for example, you have a product finding method. Instead of just remembering that method throughout, it's going to bind to a specific product. So when that product is seen later, it's going to have that merchandising EVAR product finding method tied to it. So the benefit of this is you get a lot more specificity when you're trying to look at stuff like revenue attributed to different products or different variables. And there's essentially 2 types of merchandising EVARs. There's the product syntax and the conversion syntax. So if the product syntax ones, the merge EVAR is firing the same time that you're seeing the product and it's binding to it. The conversion syntax is your merge EVAR fires, but the product hasn't fired yet, and you identify a specific binding event to it happens. So for example, at one of the previous companies I worked at, we had product finding method that fired on our search results page, but we didn't actually load any products on it. But then when somebody clicks on a product to go to the product page, we use that product view as a binding event to bind the product finding method to it. So that was a conversion syntax. So that can also be a real-time benefit, is that if you don't have something firing in the same hit, you can still bind it together.
Great. Thanks, Mandy. So I will also share the link where we have some examples related to this merchandising EVAR and how these binding will work, right, in the chat in some time. I'm just going through the documents. I don't know how I cannot find it easily. So let me quickly go through those links and share the link for you, right? For Karupaya. Thanks. Thank you for the question. Frederick, do you want to go on with the question from Workspace?
Sure.
Since because you are sharing this team, yeah.
was going to say, so I can give it back to you, but then you need to give it back to me, so we just keep it that way. So the question is, for the flow visualization, if it is instance-based or occurrence-based? And the answer is, it depends, because it can do anything you want, because it's Adobe, and Adobe does things awesomely. So in your configuration of your flow visualization, you have the option to include repeat instances. It's switched off by default, which is instance-based in your wording. So if you want to, for example, if someone goes to the same page 3 times after another and then goes to a different page, whatever you want to see in the flow visualization, you can enable here. So by default, it will only show that page you've been to 3 times once, and then shows the other page as the next page. If you enable the include repeat instances here, it will also include reloads of the page, or if you have a page view first and then 2 link events, 2 card editions happening on the same page, then it will show that page 3 times in the flow visualization. So whatever makes sense to you, you can enable and disable here. And you might want to have repeat instances on or not, really depends on your use case and how your implementation is configured. But awesomely, again, Adobe just lets us choose this and configure it. Any additions?
I guess I'm good, Frederick. I guess you almost covered everything, right? So I'm good.
Very good. So who's next? Should I just continue, or does anyone?
We can continue. I guess we can continue. I don't see any question in the chat, so we can continue to the next question. I guess this is one of the important question. I guess so. So we can continue. Yeah.
Going to say, we only have 5 minutes left, so we also need to be quick. So the question was, is there a way to create a calculated metric to depict a percentage change with regards to the previous row in a table visualization? And there is. So what you can do is you can create a calculated metric like this one, which is using the cumulative function. What this gives you is, whoops, I clicked into this by accident. What this gives you is, you can see it here, it will always give you, in this case, the sum of those 2 rows. So it always includes the current row and the previous row in this example. And you can see it just going through this, summing up the rows as you would expect. What you then can do is you can create a calculated metric simply by clicking one and then clicking the other, right-clicking it, and then say you want to subtract those, which I've already done here. And this will then give you the difference between those rows. So you can now see this will give you the difference between those, and you can then build this up to include a percentage change. So if you, I think I actually skipped a step here, sorry for that. So if you take the sum of the 2 rows and subtract the current row from it, this will give you the previous row. So you can now see this row equals this row, and this row equals this value. So you actually get the previous value from the table. And if you then do what I just said and just subtract the current value from the previous one, you have the change, which is the derivative in a mathematical sense. And then if you divide it again by the previous value, you have a percentage change. And you can then see here, for example, you have a 56% change, which is also the change from 15,000 to 23,000, which should approximately be a percentage of that change. So yeah, I'm going to look for a blog post that actually goes through this, because it's hard to explain this in 2 minutes as I just done. So, but yeah, there is a way to do that, and you can use the cumulative function to experiment with that. Oh yeah, you also have the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Oh yeah,
I guess you almost covered it.
So I just say one point about the cumulative function is to keep in mind that it works based on the time dimension. So it's going to have your current time period plus the previous one. So like October 2nd and October 1st. If you're sorting by a different column and your days are not in order, your previous row accumulation is still going to count based on those days, not necessarily the order of the rows.
Exactly. A great tip.
One thing I learned a couple months ago.
Right. Yes, then we can do a graph. We can understand what is the trend in terms of like each and every day or month by years, right? Because it is one of the cool way to see the trend, right? Great to know. We have 2 more minutes, and I guess we are almost nearing our session. Um, Anything else? I'm just looking into the chat to see whether we have any more questions. I don't see. Almost we covered and multiple links, and even Karupaya, I have also shared a link related to the merchandising Eva from Purnima Thakur, right? She is also an Adobe Analytics champion, and she writes blogs and LinkedIn, right? So yeah, so it will be really helpful. It has multiple examples as well, so you can take it from that. It has both product syntax as well as conversion variable syntax. Okay, I got it, Frederick. Yeah, thank you. This one is okay. I need to learn something from the statistical point of view, Frederick. A lot of things, right, which can be really tricky, and yeah, should learn.
Yeah. So that's also something that I think, Mandy, you went through, right? To like make a list of all those advanced functions for like calculated metrics and
Yeah,
stuff. So that's actually something, like, if you want to level up your game of like how you use Workspace and for what you use it, like checking out those advanced functions is pretty much like the way to do it, because there's so much possible with those. Sorry, Mandy.
yeah. Just gonna say the playbook that you mentioned, it's with the design team right now. We're on the third round of
It's not
revision, so
live yet. Okay.
hopefully, fingers crossed that when we get it back from the design team in a week or two, it looks good and it'll be published soon. But yeah, it's a book of all, well, not all anymore because more have been added, but of the 78 of the functions, it goes through what they are, how to use them, and a use case for using them.
That's brilliant. Okay.
So that
That's
should
fun.
hopefully come out in the next month or so. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
So, which means anything which we can do in Excel can be done in Workspace, right? And that is a blank statement I can give. No?
You can
Yes.
try.
You can try,
Some
right?
way.
Okay. Because people who are like really used to the Excel dashboards might think, right? Yeah.
True.
Great. It's time. So, since because people are into different time zone and all these being respected to their time, right? So, thanks for joining this session. Thank you all.
Sorry, I
this-
need
we
need
have-
to give you the right like outro
Oh.
music.
Yeah.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So now go. Now do your outro.
Hey, thanks, and thank you so much. Be in touch, and yeah, please make sure that in our next session, which will be on December, right? Please join and please and engage, right? Thank you so much, and thanks everyone. See you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.